No matter how many wars you fight, no matter how much blood you shed, no matter how much rage you loose, no matter how many demons you face, no matter how many companions you lose, no matter if our kingdom falls, I know that you will return to me in honor.
All right, how's everybody doing tonight? I am a little bit late tonight, but we're going to get going and hopefully we'll go for a good hour. Just someone give me a shout out in the comments, in the chat, so that you can tell me that you hear me. Just make sure that I want to make sure that everybody can hear me, that my sound is coming through okay. We have Breaker in the chat. We have Rex. He's there already. And we got about 5 or 6 other people. So, again, if anybody can hear me in the chat, just let me know. And that's great. A little update on Crom the Destroyer. A link for Crom the Destroyer is in the description. And we are just about to hit 200 backers. I think we're at 198. And we're about halfway through the campaign, which is great. Rex says he can hear me. Great. So, what I was thinking of doing with these live chats is that I want to go over again. I want to call it geeking out about making comics for now. Um, but that's what I want to do because I want to get better and better at making comics. I can't just make comics and expect them to come out okay. Expect them to be good all the time. So what I'm going to try to do, I know this isn't going to fit my schedule every week, but what I'm going to try to do is go over something every week, for me anyways, whether it be a part of a book, a chapter of a book, or a podcast or something online about making comics to make my comic writing better and my comic production better because I'm the producer as well. And I'm going to do that every week to try and make my comics better. And when I get to this Wednesday chat, I'm going to do something like 20 minutes of going over a couple of the things that I've learned during the week. And that's really what I think we need to get back to because, well, I'm going to do a video this weekend about Will Eisner, which is why you got Eisner on the front of this thumbnail for this live stream. But it's basically tangentially about him. I'm going to talk about making comics and about what some of the great people who have made comics actually say about it because what I'm going over is basically an interview oh um, with Frank Miller and his discussion about Will Eisner. And he talks a lot about making comics and how Will Eisner made comics and how he actually incorporated some of what Will Eisner said to him. And there's a lot about Frank Miller himself. But the thing is that I think a lot of that has been lost. What he talks about is Will Eisner and basically his, I don't know, his pattern of making comics and how he was trying to make it something separate unto itself. And that's what I want to do. And that's what I think we have lost within making comics right now is the fact that no, there doesn't have to be exactly a standard way to do things, but at the very least, try to have, um, try to go back to the good way of doing it, the way that it's worked before, the way that everybody has figured out how to make comics better. So why not use that? And I think that's what they got away from, especially with Marvel, and then everybody else followed after the point of around 2009, 2010. So if we want to take back comics and the production of comics, then go back to the great way of making comics. And so far, all I've been doing is taking great runs of comics and trying to extrapolate from those some of the basic rules. But again, I need to up my game. So I'm going to go back to basic writings of people like Frank Miller, like Will Eisner, like Stan Lee, like Jack Kirby, anybody who has anything out there, Jim Shooter, and I'm going to read books that I can get my hands on. I'm going to go over things that are just basic things that you should know in order to make comics. And the reason why I did this and thought about doing this is because, again, I was going over some of the rules, basic rules about lettering, and um, I ran into a couple that I myself have broken several times and never even knew that I broke them. So I want to go over that tonight. That's the thing that I learned over the last couple of weeks. So I want to go over that for about, 20 minutes tonight. And like I usually do, I'm going to say hello to everybody in the chat, but then I'm going to allow you guys to ask questions. And while I ramble on about basically making comics, and I will get to the chat when I'm done rambling in about 20 minutes, and I'll answer all your questions. So if you have any questions for me about anything, about what I'm talking about tonight, about Crom the Destroyer or the Valiant Heroes or Thomas Valiant, any of my books, which links for those are in the description. Anybody wants to order Thomas Valiant or the Valiant Heroes or Crom the Destroyer. And if you have any questions about my videos, anything. So I'll just say hello to a few people here. I see again that Breaker's in the chat. Hello, Breaker. Rex is there. How you doing? Judd is here, and so is Sound Engraver. Great. So I'm just showing you right now a little bit of Crom the Destroyer in the background. But what I'm going to do is I prepared finally a video here about lettering. It's not really, it's just a background, and it's from a website called Blambot. I think it's Liam, I can't remember his last name, um, Picros. We'll get to it in a second. But anyways, he's a professional letterer and he's worked for the big two, and he wrote a book about lettering. So I have the link for his website in the description as well, so that I didn't just rip this off of him and don't give him any credit. So his link is in the description if you want to go over and see more from him about lettering. So these are all just basically a slideshow of what he has to say, and every 30 seconds I'm gonna just go over a couple of easy things to know about making comics and about lettering that I'd never really thought of before. Okay, so first thing here, so it's Mike Picros. Anyways, yes, the link for it's in the description. First thing he says is that there is a difference between I's and I's. You don't use capital letter I. So usually in Comic Sans, which is what you would usually use for comics, and I would say that's probably the best thing to use, you use capital I only when it is um, basically um, for the beginning of a sentence, and that's, or when it's used as a personal pronoun, that you're using it as a description for someone else. That's the only time that you would typically use that. Otherwise it would just be single I. That's a safe spacer, safe, a space saver, sorry. So he goes on, and I'm just going to go through these and not really talk about them too much. And again, you can read them in the background. Basically, he talks about kerneling, which is the space between the letters, which is really hard. Trust me, I tried to do some lettering for Crom the Destroyer just to see how it would work, and trying to get the spaces between the letters right, which is kerneling, that's extremely difficult. So again, props to the letterers who do that. He talks also about sound effects, and one of the things about sound effects is that you get your artist sometimes to put in the sound effects. Sometimes you can do it for the letterer. It doesn't really matter unless you're really, really want to incorporate it into the art. So sometimes I get Renzo to do the sound effects, sometimes the letterer. One of the don'ts is never cross the tags of um, your word balloons or your thought balloons. Never. This is one of the do nots of lettering. So he goes over this fairly thoroughly, and he says this is one of the things you never do. He goes on to talk about basically word position and how you want to have an equal amount of negative space within your word balloon. That's what he's talking about here on um, this panel here. And you try to make sure that your longest words go in a way that you have basically the same amount of space within top and bottom and any middle. So um, basically, the use of negative space within your word balloon is extremely important. He also talks about constant balloon tails. If you are using different ones all the time, it's very off-putting to the reader, apparently. So you got to try and be consistent. Which ones you choose to use, that's up to you, but be consistent. He also says don't use needle point. That is to say, don't have the tails come down into such a point that it looks like a needle. That's distracting as well. Okay, so again, he talks about negative space and how you want to basically have enough room so that the eye will be able to pull out very simply from your word balloon the lettering, but not so much as that you're going to waste space, and not so little that your dialogue appears to be crowded. Again, these are just basic things about lettering that you want to take into consideration about how much room you're going to use for um, basically putting in your art and when you're writing a script. Um, Also, he's talking about non-English, as in when you're using a different language within word balloons. Typically, if you read comics, you probably know that you put a greater than, less than sign around other languages when you're using other languages. Sometimes, if you're going to keep that other language in, or words from that other language, you would italicize them just to make sure that the reader has some indication that it's not English. He also talks about proper use of quotation marks. And this is something that if you're going with modern style way of using text boxes instead of thought balloons, you need to have proper quotations at the first of the thought and then at the last of the thought. Again, all of this stuff you can go over and see on his website. And he also talks about here, this is one is a little bit more about using italics in dialogue and how you would typically use it for different things. One of the things that DC used to do was to use it when anybody's name was mentioned, any superhero's name, which was a bit off-putting. So you got to be sparse with your use of italics. Basically, it draws the eye a little too much at times. So one of the other things he talks about is ellipses and double dashes in comic dialogue. So in a North American comic, you will get a double dash, which you can use, and I use them all the time. But within European comics, you typically don't. You get a single long dash, which is an dash. But if you're going with the North American comics, you can use a double dash at the beginning and then at the end. So those are a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. I want to go into there's another 5 pages, no, another almost 10 pages of what he has to say, but I want to go over that for a minute. And I wish I could slow it down, but I can't. So I'm just going to put it in the background again and talk about lettering. So again, I'm not going to keep up with the pages this time, but I want to talk about how this affects your writing when you're actually writing a comic. So you got to actually make sure that you have enough space for what you want to put in on your dialogue in each box, especially if you are producing a comic like I do, which is to say that you're actually writing a script wherein you're giving panel layouts or suggestions of panel layouts to your artist. So one of the things is that you got to make sure you convey to your artist just how much dialogue is going to be in each panel so that you will know um, where to put things, and or he will know where to put things and how much space to use or not to use. Now, typically, if you're going back to an old Marvel style, which is what I typically go back to, what you're supposed to do if you are a producer of comics and you're writing a script is that you need to inform your artist that about 30% of the panel needs to be blank space so that you have space for the words. But again, I have a lot of heavy action within my comics. It is a lot less dialogue than you would find within a comic, say within Marvel Comics in the 70s or 80s or even the 90s, even. So there are sometimes pages of nothing but action. So we can concentrate on the action. And this is when I like to actually have Renzo or Nick or Jim's art shine. I give them all the space in the world. I say, there's no dialogue here, so go to town. One of the things you'll notice with especially really intense artists, people, if you're looking at, let's say, let me give this example. If you're looking at Conan the Barbarian, which is Marvel's Conan the Barbarian, which, I've been looking at a lot lately because I'm doing Crom the Destroyer. Again, if you want to order Crom the Destroyer, link for it is in the description. But if you look at that book, you will be surprised at just how much dialogue there is for a Conan book. There is a lot of dialogue. But the thing is that you had two guys who are typically doing the art and the script for those books. They were, for the most part, Roy Thomas and John Buscema. And they worked beautifully together and they knew exactly how to, after a while, do panel layouts, how much you need to put in for the dialogue, where you're going to have to put your figures in order for the entire thing to fit together. And if you'll notice, if you go back to those old Conan the Barbarian comics, you'll notice just how little backgrounds John Buscema puts into his basic panels. Now, you'll notice that he does put in splash pages, especially the first page, he allows basically the inker, I can't remember his inker's name off the top of my head, but he had a fabulous inker who was from, I think, Indonesia, who put in basically as much detail as he possibly could and made that art pop in something like Marvel's Treasury Edition, where you have this giant book. I don't even know how big it is. It's a couple of feet. I don't know, it's about 2 feet by 1 foot wide at least. It's more than 1 foot wide. I'd say it's probably 1.5 feet wide. Anyways, you can see all of the very detailed inking for those books. But again, the point being for lettering, that John Buscema actually put in very little background noise for the lettering to cover over. So, because he knew exactly what Roy Thomas was going to do, he was going to put these giant word balloons everywhere because there's a lot of dialogue. However, if you look at something like, I think it's king sized annual #1 for Conan the Barbarian, you'll notice there is an artist there. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's an artist that doesn't typically do comics, and he is working on this thing and he has pretty much all the time in the world. So you can see the heavy backgrounds, and even though they're covered over by word balloons, you can see that his backgrounds are detailed, detailed, detailed. So this is the problem that you're going to have to face, and it's something that as a comic producer and a comic writer, you should take into account. If you're employing someone to do the art for your book, realize just how much dialogue you're going to be using in certain panels, and instruct your artist to not put in detail in those things that are just going to be covered over by word balloons. Um, this is what I do, especially with Renzo. I let his art shine, especially the backgrounds and things like that, in certain pages, which are splash pages or pages with large panels. But within the more densely packed dialogue panels, it's it's good to tell him things like, look, just put in a blank background, whatever you can figure out. You don't have to show much because, again, you don't need to, because it's going to be covered over by the word balloons. So that's one of the things that, again, the old Marvel way of doing it is 30% of the panels should be nothing but um, extra space for you to put in your word balloons. And again, the old lettering standard for Marvel Comics used to be shove them in the top right or left hand corner. And one of the interesting things that I wanted to go over here, I'll talk a little bit more about these pages in a minute or two. Well, actually, I'll do that now. We're at about 20 minutes in. So again, this is one about kerneling. Yeah, that's extremely hard to do, to figure it out. That's why sometimes you will need a professional letterer unless you know exactly what you're doing, or there's some program out there, which I don't know of, which kernels your Comic Sans automatically to what you're looking for, or you just take the patience and the time to actually kernel it yourself, which is basically the space between letters, because they need to be spaced. Almost the entire alphabet has to be spaced according to how it looks right when you're going to letter. Um, One of the other things that I learned about lettering And maybe next week I'll talk a little bit more about this because he does have a lot more to say that Nate Picos about this and a lot more that actually affects your writing. One of the things that is that when, again, we're looking at don't cross the balloon tails. That's one of the things that's a do not do because it confuses your reader. Um, Again, I think I broke this once or twice, or we might have broken this once during Thomas Valiant #1. Not entirely sure. I have Eric Weathers doing the the lettering, so he's fairly good. So the thing is that what I was thinking about doing in some of the newer panels that I was writing scripts for was leave a blank space in the middle. We'll have two characters, one on each side, on the right and the left of this larger panel, and we'll have a discussion in the middle. Typically, letterers will tell you you don't do it that way. Why? Because it separates it into almost being two panels. And if you're going to have two panels, then have two panels. It draws the eye into a very bad situation because the whole point of sequential art in comics is that the panel gutters are where your audience is actually going to use their imagination to figure out the difference between panel 1 and panel 2. So, your interactive storytelling with your audience and their ability to actually fill in that gap between the panel gutter of 1 and 2 panel is up to them. And when their mind gets confused about where a panel gutter goes, then you have a problem because they're going to basically realize they're reading a story and their suspension of disbelief is gone. So putting a conversation in the middle of a large panel so that it breaks the panel into two, again, is a visual discomfort for someone who is typically reading a comic. It may not be something that's there in the front of your mind, but it's typically, again, historically, the way that people viewed this within comic making is don't do that. And again, this is something that I had never thought of myself until I started reading these things about lettering. One of the other things is, again, I probably will talk about this a little bit more next week because I'm already going up to about 25 minutes here already talking about lettering. Um, but we're talking about making comics, which is what I want to do. One of the things that, if you go back to Will Eisner, this is why, like I said, my video coming on Saturday will be tangentially about Will Eisner. But one of the things that Will Eisner said about lettering, and we're going back to Will Eisner, who, you know, he basically gave, I think, Jack Kirby his first job. So this is how far back we're going with a guy who was making comics. He, I think, lettered his own books. He did The Spirit. Again, the thumbnail for this live stream is one of his Spirit covers. Um, but if I remember correctly, he also lettered all of his own books as well. And one of the arguments actually, that he had with Frank Miller was you can't have more than one response per panel. That is to say, if you have two characters in a panel, character 1 says one thing, character 2 responds. You can't then, this is again according to the rules of Will Eisner, you can't then have character 1 respond to the response of character 2. Why? Because in his mind, sequential art doesn't work that way. Sequential art, he says, is a picture in time of one moment. And if you're having a person say something and then a response and then a response to that second response is a second moment. Therefore, you can't have a second response within your panel. Again, these are just Will Eisner's rules. And again, he argued with Frank Miller about this. Frank Miller had some other things to say about it. Frank Miller, with his Daredevil, he broke these rules all the time. But again, he wrote these Daredevils and broke those rules before I think he met Will Eisner. And he probably stopped doing that a lot after he met him and discussed with him and argued with him about how to make comics and how the lettering affects how you're supposed to write and the art. Because again, you had a time when Frank Miller was basically doing the story and the art for Daredevil. Again, there are points, I would say, where you can break this rule, although I think it is a very good rule. It's one that I will try to again, try to um, bring into my thoughts when I'm actually writing a script. But when you have something like Marvel's use of, which is basically something I think that started with Spider-Man, but may have started with Daredevil. I'm not entirely sure. But those two characters in particular, you would get a panel where you have a grayed out picture of that character, Spider-Man, being in several positions throughout the panel, so that he's jumping from one place to another, to another, to another. And this is something, again, you would get. I don't know if you get it typically within modern Spider-Man, but within, again, 70s and 80s Spider-Man, you would get it. And it started to show up, I think, in Daredevil after that, although I could be mistaken. It could be before that. So if you have something like that, you're typically breaking that rule of one instant in time, anyways. Either that, or you're putting it, I guess it would be more than a sequence within one panel, because again, you have that character within several positions. So could you have more than one balloon, more than one thought, more than one retort to something that is going to be lettered? I would say you could break that rule there. But again, is that typically something that you're going to do? No, it's something that I do within my books, especially with the character Pharaoh, because basically one of the main strengths of the character is her strength plus her gymnastic skills. So again, you have her in several different places at once within a panel, wherein some of them are grayed out so that you'll see that she's moving in a very fast manner. So this is something I do, and something I'm going to probably struggle with when I am going to be writing this character a little more, because right now, actually, I'm writing the script, or finishing off the script, for Thomas Valiant #2. Renzo is working on the first pages of it right now. The first chapter is written. The second and third chapters are just in a loose format right now. But again, these are things that I'm going to incorporate into the way that I make comics. And again, what I want to do with these live streams and with my own free time is go through as much material as possible about the best way to make comics, which is the older ways to make comics, which has been abandoned by the comic industry, both the big two and the major indie companies. They've all abandoned the great way of making comics, the rules for making comics. And again, sometimes the rules are made to be broken, but at the same time, you can't break a rule in the correct fashion without actually knowing what the rules are. And just to give you some examples of where I think Marvel and DC are falling down, if you look at some of these Marvel stories where you have a single page, which is supposed to be a splash page with no, well, first of all, you got no action. You just have two characters talking to each other, which is just a waste of space. But again, you get a statement and a response, and a statement and a response, and a statement and a response. This is where Will Eisner's rule would just kick you in the face, saying, you don't do it that way. That is not how sequential art works. If you want a big diatribe, go write yourself a novel. You're going to have to be more pithy when you actually write, when you're writing a comic book, and it has to take into consideration the sequential art and the lettering and the space that you're going to have for lettering, etc., etc., etc. All right, so there's my big spiel about lettering. And again, I'm probably going to talk a little bit more about lettering um, when I do next week's live stream as well. Although, who knows, I could be moving on to something else. But again, if you want to take a look at these pages that I'm showing you in the background of Nick Picos, who is a professional letterer, and he worked for Marvel, I think, and DC, which they usually have, or during his time anyways, they had a typical house style for lettering. Again, you want to see these pages, you can go over to his website, and the link for that is in the description. You just got to scroll past the link for Crom the Destroyer and for the Valiant Heroes. And I think my Twitter handle is in there as well. If you want to go and order a copy of Crom the Destroyer or the Valiant Heroes or Thomas Valiant, you can get Thomas Valiant at the Valiant Heroes if you order that. And those are all in the description. So again, that's my rambling on about lettering for today, and my geeking out about making comics. So again, I am not going to stand here or sit here and try to I'm not going to pontificate. Let me put it that way. I'm not speaking to you on high saying, this is how you make comics. I'm saying, this is how I'm learning my mistakes about making comics. So maybe you can get something out of it as well, because this is the way that old greats for comics actually made comics beautiful and readable, and something that people, especially younger people, kids, just wanted to pick up and read and make fun. So, I mean, if you can't have fun with making comics, then what are you doing here? That's the big question. So again, so I just wanted to let everybody know that right off the bat with this first stream where I'm doing about this exact thing, which is talking about exactly how to make comics, or the historical way of making comics. This is not me pontificating, telling you how to make comics. This is me saying this is the way people did it in the past, and their names are great now, so maybe we ought to listen to them. And this is me with you learning how to make comics. So let's go through some of the chat, see what we got here. And if we have a bunch of questions, I will answer them. If not, I'll go on a little bit more about lettering, because I do have a whole bunch more to say, but I might leave that until next week. Let's see. Let's see. Sound Engravers here, and Rex is here. Michael is here. Scrolling down a little bit. Judd is here. Let's see. Let's see. Here's a good statement here. Judd says, kerneling is something that once you know about it, you see bad examples of it and it hurts your eyes. Yes, exactly. So if you came in late, kerneling is basically the spaces between letters. And if you have a font, which is something that is unique, like Comic Sans, or something else that you're going to use as unique within comics, if the kerneling is not exactly right, it is going to throw your reader for a loop, because they're going to see a space where there shouldn't be a space. They're going to think it's two words instead of one, and they're just going to be confused. And again, you draw them out of their suspension of disbelief, which is the exact thing you don't want to do. I think the best, what is it? The way that comic lettering is described, in the best way that I heard it described, was it's an art unto itself, and the best way that that art can be expressed is by not being noticed. And that's what your lettering is supposed to do. It's supposed to be there so that the reader can read it along with the sequential art, and they're not supposed to notice that they're reading it. And if your kerneling is not right, your space between your letters is not right, then it's going to throw your reader off. And again, the space between letters is going to be different, and every different combination that you can think of. So there's not just your normal alphabet that you're going to have to kernel. You're going to have to do it as different for each letter and for each combination of letters sometimes. So you're going to have to change it. So it is something very much, yes, Judd, very much that's going to hurt your eyes, and it's going to take you out of your reading. So let's see, scrolling down a little bit here, see if I have any more questions. Paulus says, what's this about? I just picked up Nate Bykos' lettering book a week ago. Yeah. Um, and I'm just going through a couple of the pages myself. And these are the kind of things that I want to go through. Again, his books should be available. Yeah, you can order it from anywhere. Again, you can get the basics from his website, which again, link for it is in the description, and order yourself one of his books and see how complicated lettering actually is. Let's see, scrolling down. Um, Illustrator keeps letters even. You can change, Illustrator keeps letters even. Oh, okay. That's good to know. I'll have to write that down somewhere. You can change the text lines to be wider if needed. Very good. That's a good note for someone, for me, and anyone else who wants to try their hand at lettering just to see how difficult it is. uh, and again, this is one of the things I would encourage you to do, because lettering is difficult. I mean, it's fun if you ask me, but it is difficult. And you will have much more of an appreciation of how to put the book together, how to put your panels together, how to, if you're a writer, instruct your artist to put the panels together, and how many panels you get on the page, etc., etc. And again, this is all part of the fun of learning how to make comics. So I'm gonna have to remember that. Illustrator. All right. So scrolling down, let's see, scrolling down through the comments. Breaker says the asterisk comics had different speech bubbles to denote different languages. Gaulish was in rounded bubbles, Germanic in angular ones, and Egyptian spoke in pictograms. So, honestly, this is one of the things I don't know. I don't know if the older comics, I would say Asterix Gaul was probably done wherein the artist did the lettering himself as well. I'm just guessing. But from what I remember of that comic, I would say most probably the artist himself did the lettering, which again would probably take the artist and, well, I don't know, extend his time to making the book by at least another third. But at the same time, it would be something that would give it a distinct feel to it. And you'll see that in a lot of different comics. Even I was talking about The Saint, which is Will Eisner. He uses a lot of different, um, I guess it wouldn't be for different people in different languages, but for different expressions and how to express yourself, use different kinds of words balloons. You'll see sometimes he uses word balloons that have multiple bumps in them, which is the old DC way of doing it, wherein the newer Marvel way of doing it is just to use one oval. Sometimes he'll use one oval, sometimes he'll use multiple ovals or multiple bumps. And sometimes when he used thought balloons, you'll see, holy Moses, because I believe he did his own lettering. You think that it's hard for a letterer to do lettering today. If you look at his stuff and basically the thought balloons where you have a cloud like balloon, he put in extra art for the cloud itself, especially on the bottom, as if it was a cloud. It's amazing to see how an artist actually will do the balloons for letterings. It's really something to behold when you look at those old books. So yeah, for me, anyways, though, I'm very much used to the Marvel style, which is use ellipses for your word balloons. That's something else I want to talk about next week again because it's in more of the pages from Neil Picos. I think that's how I pronounce his name in my head, anyways. Um, but he also talks about the fact that it shouldn't be an exact oval in itself. It should be something that's hand rendered to some extent because it's going to look off next to your art because that's hand drawn. Even when you do it on a computer screen or a tablet, it's still hand drawn. So you try to get those two things to match. But again, to me, there needs to be that Marvel style, if you ask me, of using what is basically an oval for most of your word balloons. To me, that is how it blends into the background in my mind. But again, I'm someone who also uses thought balloons. I like thought balloons. I don't like the way that people in comics use thought captions now and caption boxes. That really doesn't work for me. I want the thought balloons in order to actually, I don't know. I think it gives it more of a personal feel to the character when you have it in a thought balloon. But yes, good to know. I'll have to go back and look at Asterix the Gaul. Thank you for that, Breaker. Let's see. Paula says lettering is fun. Yes. Again, I would agree. This is something about making comics that I didn't realize until I got into a spot. I needed to have some pages lettered, and my letterer wasn't free. So I had to do some lettering myself. It is fun. It's difficult, but it's fun. And have fun making comics, really. That's what I'm trying to say over and over again. Let's see if we have any more comments here. Jen Pashy says, hey, I'm a long-time subscriber and working on a comic and animated series called Augur. It would be really cool if you'd give it a watch when you get the chance. All right. Well, you can send it to me. I don't know if you're on Twitter, but my Twitter handle is in the description. If you want to go over and follow me on Twitter, um, you can follow me and then send me a DM if you wanted to talk to me. If you're talking to everybody else, you can try and put the link for it in the chat if you want, but I don't know if it will show up. It depends on how YouTube is feeling right now. If you're talking directly to me, the best way would probably be to DM me on Twitter. Um, if not, if you're not on Twitter, my email address is on my YouTube channel. You just got to go to the About page and go through the I'm Not a Robot section and find my channel email address, and you can send it there. All right, so scrolling down a little bit. Jen says, also thanks for this, and as I have trouble with comic layouts and lettering sometimes. If you're doing both the comic layouts and the art and the lettering, you got more patience than me, and it's going to take you a lot of time, but it'll be a work of passion, let me tell you. So scrolling down, more power to you. Scrolling down, let's see if we got any more comments. Zaktan says, even in a dialogue, have the characters move around or change the camera angle to explore the same scene. I completely agree. I'm always saying this when I'm writing scripts for Renzo. Basically, if we have a discussion on the page, because again, I have so much action going on within my books. I try to give you like 80% action within my books. And you do have to break it up a little bit with downtime, because there has to be a little bit of explanation of what is going on. So you're sometimes going to have a conversation, and I will say to Renzo, basically, what I'll write in my script is, this is the panel. This person is on this side. This person is on that side. And this is what they're going to say. And then if they're going to continue that conversation, I say, same as panel one, different angle. So Renzo knows that he's going to put it from a different angle, and he's going to give it some dynamism within the discussion. So he's going to change it, and he's going to give you a different way of looking at the same characters, and hopefully that different perspective will, at the very least, keep your mind fresh so that you can keep on reading what I have to say, which is typically, I don't do it for more than a couple of panels at a time, at the absolute max one page, so that you will power through that page and know what's going on, and just look at Renzo's art and see how spectacular he can come up with these different panel layouts and different angles. I use worm eyes view. I guess that's how you'd say it. Worm eye view, I guess, is the best way to put it. I use worm eye view a lot, and I instruct them, use a worm eye view here, because we want to look up at them. They want to be heroic, all these kinds of things. So yeah, I agree completely, Zach Dan. Let's see here. Stress level 99%. Stress level, how you doing? I saw you in the chat there. Let's see. Subverting tropes for its own sake is no different than using them normally for its own sake. Hack writers use it thinking that it'll just write their story for them and they'll just reap the rewards. I completely agree. This is one of the things I want to talk about in one of these live streams, is the fact that, again, you have these, I'll probably be talking about it on this weekend's video as well, when I'm going over that discussion. Basically, it's Klaus Janson, who is the inker for Daredevil when Frank Miller was doing it, and Frank Miller talking about Will Eisner. But yes, you have these people which is people in the audience at that event in 2017. And you could see that and listen to what they had to say sometimes at the first. They're trying to subvert what is basic, not just tropes, but basic ways that human beings are trying to interact. That's what your quote unquote progressives do. They try to subvert those things. And again, when you do that, you're going to actually have to put something of a stabilizer in there at the very least. I don't like, I know everybody here knows in the chat, everybody knows I don't like this quote unquote progressive way of thinking or telling a story or anything else. But if you're going to subvert a trope, or you're going to put in subversion in some way in your story, you're gonna have to actually give the reader some stability, and that stability can be within your comic making itself. But these guys are throwing out the baby with the bathwater and saying, oh no, we're going to make comics completely different than anybody has made comics before, and we're going to subvert the standard tropes altogether at the same time, and they're giving no one a basis in order for them to actually have some reference points to understand the damn story. So yeah, you're completely right, stress level. Subverting tropes is just a trope in itself these days. But at the same time, these people are subverting everything at the same time, which makes it even worse. Let's see, scrolling down. Paula says, yep, my brother writes novels. I told him to keep the dialogue snappy and to keep things moving for the comic we're working on. Very good. Um, I'm the same. I don't write novels. I've written at the very least one novel manuscript, had it professionally edited, but I go on and on. I don't know if you know this about me from listening to my videos, but I seem to drone on and on. And I love writing dialogue. If I ever get stuck writing something, I will just write dialogue. That's how typically I um, want to get into writing. If I'm trying to put a scene together and I don't know exactly what is going to happen next, I write the dialogue and then the rest will write itself. So I tend to write long monologues of dialogue, which when putting it into comic form has to be snapped down to its bare minimum. So yeah, pithy is the word. Um, if you go to the Valiant Heroes campaign page, again, link for it is in the description. Um, one of the stories is the Rampaging Thor. Mike Gustovich is doing the pencils for that. He is an old artist for Marvel and DC. And the thing is that I gave him the script for a short story that I had written basically about the Rampaging Thor, and I converted it into a story for a comic. And I'm going to have to rewrite the entire thing when I go to get the lettering done because, again, to fit it into the art, I'm going to have to break everything up, not only into panels, but at the same time because he's already done the art. He finished the other day, and we're doing the last of the inking now. I think there's about 4 pages of inking left on that. So I'm going and the coloring for the first 10 pages is done. So again, going to have to start putting in the lettering, but I'm going to have to take all of my dialogue and cut it in half, and at the very least, put it in a different format so that it will pull with the art in the same direction as I usually say. So yeah, pithy. Pithy is the key word for writing a comic book. So scrolling down a little bit, let's see if these comics, let's see. Jen says, also keep making live streams like this. They're very useful. Well, hopefully they're very useful. Again, it's just me talking about how I am making comics and the things that I learned. So thank you. Thank you for that. Let's see. Let's see. Scrolling down. Paula says, for sure, we are learning. Even Ethan Van Sciver is learning 30 years into the game. Well, that's good. I'm glad he's learning. Again, if we want to take back the comic industry and give it to people of merit again, we need to have merit within what we're doing. So we need to make things better and better every time we make something. Let's see. Let's see. I love lettering. I'm fine with more of it. Yes. Uh, Lettering is again someone who does lettering has a keen temperament. Let me put it that way. Paula says one more thing to say. He says, I think it's kerning. Oh, rather than kernelling. Sorry for being pedantic. Nope, don't worry about that. So again, I will thank you very much for that. Um, I am just learning the language for lettering itself. So again, that's how little I know about lettering. Uh, so go ahead and correct me. I'm fine with that. Scrolling down, let's see. Everybody have fun. Everybody have fun tonight says lettering is the most subtle of the art forms. If it's good, you don't notice it. Exactly. That's what I was saying. That's what the lettering should be as an art form, to not see it. Let's see. Scrolling down, scrolling down. Zach Dan has a question. Beginner question, but do you draw the balloons first or the text? Um, Again, depends on how you're lettering. Again, each letterer has its own way of doing things. Um, But I think honestly, I don't listen to me because I'm not a letterer. You can actually go over to Nate's page and probably take a look through those pages that I will put back up in the background one more time, at least one more time, so that you have something to look at in the background. Um, I think he does it both ways. Again, you have to be able to find, first of all, where you're going to put it into your panel. Um, and that will determine how your word order goes and how your line spacing goes. And from that, you will then have to put in your word balloon. That's as far as I can tell from what he does and how he does it. But again, um, I don't think that there's a standard way that you have to do it. I think that it has to be um, basically panel by panel, word balloon by word balloon, which is exactly what I was saying about the fact that um, it's so time consuming for someone who doesn't know exactly what they're doing with lettering. Sorry, I'm just scrolling up here because I lost my space here. Okay, there we go. All right. So I think Paulus might have answered his question in the chat, but we'll keep on going. Scrolling down a little bit. Vaz says, do you get in a situation where you need to rewrite the dialogue after the art came in because of the space it occupied or the art it would hide? Yes, indeed. And I have done that for Thomas Valiant #1. Again, I have to cut things to the bone basically to make sure that I have enough room so that I don't cover over Renzo's art. Sometimes try as you must with your scripts. You're not going to convey exactly everything to your artist in the way that he thinks exactly what you think when he's putting together a page. So yeah, sometimes I have to restructure. And that's one of the things, again, if you have a good letterer, they will help you do, because again, I have Eric Weathers who's doing the lettering, excuse me. And he will sometimes get back to me and say, hey, listen, we need to chop this up so that I'm going to take part of this sentence and put it in the next panel. Is this okay? Things like that. So that will be part of the lettering process if you have a good letterer, if you ask me. But at the same time, yes, sometimes I have to chop my dialogue to the bone. So yes, have to rewrite. It's not something I do with everything, but it happens. Scrolling down, let's see, scrolling down. Rex says, had to learn the hard way how difficult lettering can be and figuring out what can stay and what should go. Indeed, it is something that every comic writer should know about because it does affect the way that you're going to tell your story. So, yeah, that's why I'm going over it here, because it's something that I should have known more about before I wrote my comics, and I didn't. And it's going to be incorporated into the two comics that I'm doing right now, because the Valiant Heroes is going to be lettered really soon, and Crom the Destroyer will be hopefully out the end of this year, maybe early next year. It's supposed to be the end of this year. So I'm going to incorporate that into basically tightening up my scripts before we get them lettered. So scrolling down, Paula says, Blambot has a YouTube channel. He's been releasing live lettering videos, time lapsed, with his commentary. Yes, he does. And I would suggest you go on over and take a look if you want a little bit more understanding of lettering than, and a lot more than anything I can give you. Let's see. Scrolling down. Everybody have fun tonight, says Aristotle would approve of the use of sound effects in comics. Well, Greeks, onomatopoeia is a Greek word. So, I think it's a Greek word. I'm pretty sure if I remember my Greek correctly. So, yeah, he probably would. There we go. You gotta mention Aristotle in every video. Scrolling down. Let's see. Paulus has Zach Dan's answer here. I do the text first, but I do layout approximations on thumbnails where I'm going to place the balloons before that. Oh, one of the things that I also find, thank you very much for that answer, Paulus. One of the things that some of my artists will do, I have, both my artists for Crom the Destroyer, who are Nick Axe and Jim O'Reilly. Both of them like to letter the pages themselves as they're doing the art, just to ensure that they have enough space for the lettering. It's just a temporary lettering that they throw up there. It's not something that's going to be professionally done or put in there. But yeah, that's one of the things. Again, if you have a really keen artist, they will do that themselves. So just to make sure that they have enough room. Scrolling down a little bit, let's see. Paulus has a lot to say on lettering because he's a letterer, so great to hear. Let's see. Blambot's website has some helpful hints for lettering. That's how I first started lettering, as well as balloon tails. Very good. I agree completely. Again, link for his website is in the description if you want to go over and take a look at it. And again, as Paulus has said, he has a YouTube channel where you can take a look at some of his lettering on live streams. And he also has a book. So you can take a look at that and order that if you want. Scrolling down. Let's see. Breaker says, now that we have things like Photoshop, it's easy to superimpose speech balloons and sound effects over the art, but I imagine that improper placement will ruin panels. Yes, indeed. And again, this is one of the things. What I'm doing with this is one of the things that I didn't know about because again, go to Nate's page again, which is the stuff we're looking at in the background. He does hand draw the balloons. He does basically a number of different hand drawn balloons. So he takes an oval and then he'll do an oval freehand according to the shape that he'll need it. And then he'll use his freehand oval in order to make it look like it fits more within the hand drawn panels. So it's something that I had never thought of, but it's something that really scratched the back of my mind when I was looking at the lettering for some comics, especially it's something that, again, within the Rampaging Thor book that I'm doing, with the pencils are being done by Mike Gustovich, right? If you're looking at something that's hand drawn on a piece of paper, a lot of people like Renzo, who is the artist for Thomas Valiant and the Valiant Heroes, he does most of his stuff on a tablet. But if you're looking at the pencils for Mike Gustovich, he's doing them completely on paper and then he'll scan them. So you're looking at something that's that much hand drawn and has the, I don't know, the uniqueness of being hand drawn. You want to also make sure that your word balloons match it so that, again, even the shape of the balloon is not going to take the reader out of the story. So that's something that I'm going to try to incorporate into the Rampaging Thor book that, again, we're going to get lettered really soon. So yeah, the improper placement of word balloons and all that kind of stuff is very, very much something that you're going to have to take into consideration. You want to learn more about lettering and how to do a comic. Paula says, it's all good. My brother long-winded too. My brother's long-winded too. He loves writing. Yeah, I am long-winded. I quite agree. Let's see. Scrolling down. Rex has another statement here. He says, on an interesting note, the website TV Tropes actually this classic anti-hero, a mostly noble hero who suffers from flaws and hindrances that must be overcome. Classic anti-hero? I, I don't think that's the definition of a classic anti-hero. But anyways, did you know that, I don't know if it's TV Tropes, there is a trope website that is connected to TV Tropes. Somebody put Thomas Valiant, which is my first graphic novel, on that website. Because basically what I did was I took Marvel and DC heroes and smushed them together. So it's taking two characters, one from Marvel and one from DC, and smushing them together to make a third character, because that's where I wanted to start. Again, beginning with great ideas and great heroes, and these things that would be familiar to people, so that I don't have to write too much of a backstory, because you'll have a visual cue saying, oh, I know this character, or basically what this character is about, because I've read Marvel or DC characters, or I've watched them on television or in movies. Therefore, I don't have to spend all my time, doing all of that. So someone threw up Thomas Valiant into the trope sphere. I don't know if it's TV tropes or it's the one that's connected to TV tropes. I thought that was really funny when I came across that. So yeah, if you just let everybody know, the links are in the description for the Valiant Heroes and Thomas Valiant, and for Crom the Destroyer, my books. So if anyone wants to order copies of those, let's see. Jen says, no, he's talking to Paulus Arts. The Fourth Age is one of my favorite comic channels. Thank you very much. That's much appreciated. Although I don't always talk about comics, I like to bring it back to comics because that's just where my mind goes all the time. Scrolling down. Scrolling down. We actually did hit our hour, so I'm going to scroll down to the last of these comments. Let's see. Paula says, it's been a while for me since I've watched the video, but I have to agree. Very knowledgeable fellow. Well, I try. Let me put it that way. I try, if you're talking about me. Scrolling down. Let's see. Breaker says, apologies for not being so talkative today. Work went on longer than it should have. Quite all right. Let's see. Michael, you're in the chat. Here you are saying, does speech to text software make being a writer easier or harder? Speech to text software. I had speech to text software back in the 1990s. It's not something new. You just had to work at training the stupid computer so that it would be able to pick up what you have to say. I honestly think that it's not speech to text software that makes writing much better. It's text to speech software that makes writing much better. Why? Because there's nothing better than you actually shoving your story into a computerized text to speech and listening to it by someone who doesn't actually, it's a computer, so they don't actually know what you're saying. And if you want to pick out especially little things that you never saw before, inaccuracies in your language, or even when you edit it and you've missed something, which is even just a spelling mistake, listen to your story be read back to you by a computer. It is the best thing, if you ask me, as an editing process for you as a writer before you actually give it to your editor. To me, anyways, it's amazing. So scrolling down, let's see. All right, I think I got to the end of the chat. I'll take Michael off here, and I want to thank everybody for showing up. We have, oh, wait a minute, Paulus has a question. 1 second. Question. What topics were on your previous Geeking Out About Comics streaming about? Let me see. I don't even know off the top of my head. I did do a video a couple of months ago about panel layout. It has a Conan the Barbarian thumbnail, John Buscema. That was a couple of months ago before the live streams. The last live streams, I talked about more about creating a Indiegogo page and about putting your stuff out there for crowdfunding for the Geeking Out About Comics. I think it was the one before I started geeking out about comics. Last week or 2 weeks ago, I did one about dynamic covers and how you should have a 3 points of danger or 3 points of action, one or the other. And I'm just looking at old Jonah Hex covers, and I don't know what I talked about last week off the top of my head. There was a bunch of mishmash about other things last week. I don't even. Oh yeah, it was about sound effects last week. I talked about sound effects in the Walter Simonson kind of way. Again, that's something that is connected to lettering, and I'll probably be revising a lot of what I have to think a lot of what I said and thought about sound effects when I am looking at more and more the complexities of lettering. So yeah, those are the things that I talked about in the last couple of Geeking Out About Comics. So I want to thank everybody once again for showing up for my Wednesday live stream. Just to let everybody know, if you're a regular here for the live streams, um, I will try to do them on Wednesday nights. But again, as some of you may know, I live in the deep woods, so I use satellite internet, and that can be affected by the weather. So if there's going to be bad weather on a Wednesday night, which is the only time I can really stream, because basically the satellite is used by a whole bunch of people, and the less people on the satellite, the better my stream goes. That's why I do it basically in the middle of the night on a Wednesday, because very few people are using the satellite. And therefore, that's why I'm picking this time slot in order to get it done. But if there's really bad weather on the Wednesday night, I will probably throw something up saying no live stream tonight, and I will try on a Thursday to actually do the live stream. If there's bad weather both on the Wednesday and the Thursday nights, there's nothing I can do about it. But again, if I miss a live stream on a Wednesday, if you're a regular here, check on the Thursday night and I will try to get it in then. So again, I want to thank everybody once again for showing up, and links are in the description for the Valiant Heroes, for Crom the Destroyer, and if you want a copy of Thomas Valiant, if you order either Crom the Destroyer or the Valiant Heroes, you can at checkout also get a copy of Thomas Valiant. And that being said, again, links for all of that are in the description. We're about to hit 200 backers for Crom the Destroyer, which is great. We're about halfway done of the campaign. So we're doing pretty good. It's about, I think we're about at $12,300 for the campaign, which again, I want to thank everybody profusely for backing. And I know that everybody's purse strings are tight these days. So the fact that you're able to put out the money for my books, I appreciate every last person that has been doing that. So for this live stream, I changed it up a little bit. I gave everybody the second trailer for Crom the Destroyer at the beginning of this live stream, which I usually do at the end. And at the end, I'm going to do the first trailer for Crom the Destroyer. It is the long one, long being 1 minute and 45 seconds. So that's going to be my outro for today. So again, thank you everybody for showing up, and I'll see you all again next week. Bye.
An age ago, the beating heart of our people was a king who knew only victory. He wanted nothing more than an honorable death on the battlefield. Yet, none could match him, and so he wandered the earth, becoming lost in time and tide. Then we too lost our honest purpose, while silk-clad men sat upon the throne. But tremble now, all cities that lay under the stars, for out of the shadows and mists of the land of promise, our courage has been rekindled, our heart has returned, and the world will burn.